Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I am playing as the Norskins against the Dwarves led by Maverick77 on map Volksgrad. I did want to apologize as we start off for missing a day of gameplay, and that was because my headset completely broke down, and I didn't even realize it. I was actually in the middle of recording, and after the fact I actually uploaded the video. Perhaps some of you guys saw it. Turns out that there was actually no sound, so definitely a bit of a problem there. Regardless, going into this match, I'm actually going to leave things in slow-mo for a bit. Wanted to try out the Ice Trolls against the Dwarves. Now, Ice Trolls are a bit of an interesting unit, and they're basically like the normal Trolls, of course. They do have regen, they have all that stuff, but they do hit a little harder. They do have somewhat better stats in melee. They do cause Frostbite, which is not that relevant against Dwarves, and they have a somewhat better charge bonus. So I want to try them out against Dwarves. They are a little more susceptible to fire damage, which is a little unfortunate, but actually a lot more susceptible. It's a 40% weakness rather than just the 20%. But nonetheless, Ice Trolls are definitely potentially a very high damage unit. So I wanted to give them a shot against Dwarves because I figured the Dwarves would have a hard time stopping him if they didn't shoot him down. For my lord, I did bring good old Wulfric the Wanderer on a chariot, of course, because that gives him a massive anti-infantry bonus. It gives him a huge bunch of mass, so dwarves have a lot of times hard time shutting him down. And he does actually get a silver shield with, and as well as 4,000 HP, so it makes him very tanky, especially the missile fire, which dwarves tend to field en masse. He also, of course, comes in with Sword of Torgal, Hunter of Champions, and Standard Die. I did not bring Seafang because I figured it would not be that useful in this situation. Alongside him, I did bring a Shaman Sorcerer of Battle, also on a chariot, which also gives him that nice charge bonus, that good mobility, as well as, of course, that bonus against infantry. He is coming in with Final Transmutation, as well as Transformation of Lead, and Transmutation of Lead, and he's just here to provide me with some decent damage support. He also does, of course, have armor piercing improvement with metal shifting, which, given that I have a very armor piercing heavy army, should be pretty useful. My front line is composed entirely of Chaos Marauders with Norscan Marauders with great weapons, slightly leveled up with some spare points, and they are all kind of anchored here in the center with the Brutes of the Hound, who are, of course, the Regiment of Renown Berserkers. And despite the fact that they aren't really Berserkers are not really anti-armor, they will still perform fairly well against Dwarves. Over here you can see the Shaman Sorcerers already taking cannon fire, and the Dwarves are definitely trying to knock him down as quickly as they can. My backline is composed entirely of 3 units of Marauder Hunters with throwing axes. This was another unit I kind of wanted to give a shot to. These guys, of course, have armor-piercing damage, and they can actually dish out quite a bit of hurt. So I want to see, in a fairly short amount of time, I want to see how much use I could get out of them against Dwarves. Finally, out here on the flank, I do have the Maws of Savagery, who are, of course, the Regiment of Renowned Skinwolves. These guys are very good against dwarves simply because they have armor piercing, all while being a fairly mobile cavalry-ish unit. They're kind of like Demigryph Knights with a bit less survivability, really. And yeah, so these guys are just very, very solid in general. Immune to psychology, they cause fear, they, of course, have frenzy, regen. They're just a very strong unit against dwarves in general. My opponent brought a, I think, pretty conventional dwarf army. Did bring Ungrim Iron Fist here for his lord. Ungrim, of course, coming in actually with Axe of Drago, which will boost his damage, or Axe of Dargo, as well as his bonus versus large. More importantly, though, of course, he does have standing ground. He's unbreakable, and with that bonus against large, if he gets his hands on poor Wulfric, then he'll actually beat him down pretty hard, potentially. He's also a fairly cheap lord, as far as the legendary lords go, which is pretty nice. Here, for the kind of core of his army, my opponent has 2 units of long range with great weapons, as well as the Grumbling Guard, which of course provides that immunity to vigor. One of the important things to remember, though, is that the Grumbling Guard does not have charge defense against large, which normal long periods do have, and that could be a bit of a problem against my trolls as well as the chariots. And finally, he does have a unit of hammerers here. Could dish out a lot of hurt. I'm not entirely sure they're the best against dwarves or against Norska, because Norska doesn't have much armor usually, but nonetheless, against some of the units, such as for example Fimir, they could perform pretty well, or champions, they'll crush them. Norgliming's Ironbreakers do kind of anchor this my opponent's left flank over here, and these guys, of course, with their satchel charges and their blasting charges and their huge amount of melee defense, are very, very hard to kill and break. In the back, 2 units of Rangers with just providing some missile support and some good old focus fire, and a unit of Slayers, Dragonback Slayers here, to cover the back line against any monsters units, which of course Norska tends to bring in mass. Then Goblobber to break up my morale and beat up on my squishy units, and a cannon to shut down any large targets. And so without further ado, kind of kicking things into full gear here. As you can see, my sorcerer kind of did some scouting, baited some charges out of the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers. Now you can see the trolls are taking fire. But not much is really happening. I mean, basically, just at this point, it's basically me just posturing, trying to reveal the units here in the woods, and work my way a little closer with my large units. Unfortunately, I don't want my well, not unfortunately, but I don't want my trolls charging in right away because obviously I don't want them just getting shut down and murdered by the dwarven infantry and kind of mobbed. I did know that my opponent had most likely had some units still hidden around, so I wouldn't be careful about that. I do cast a overcast invocation, or not invocation attack, overcast final transmutation here. And as you can see, it's actually doing a decent amount of damage. And I'm just kind of posturing with the chariots. I don't want to commit any of these units. I do know that Longbeards have charge defense against large, and I do see Ungrim, so I know that if I get bogged down, I will take a lot of hurt. But as you can see, Final Transmutation against dwarves is actually doing a pretty decent job here. It does knock him down by about 1,200, by about 1,400 HP, and damages the units around him. But now you can see I'm kind of aligned, and of course there is a chance that they will resist, and you can see that different units resist to different quality. Wolfric here does charge into the Grumbling Guard, who of course don't have a charge defense though against large, though they are fairly resilient to when they are in the woods like this and slowing down my chariots. The trolls do push in now, and they are kind of getting stuck into things. Over here, the Marauders with great weapons who are trying to flank are going to end up swinging around into Norgrim's Ironbreakers, just trying to time down. I do get a few throwing axes into them, which does a little bit of damage, and now it's going to be a long grinding battle. Norgrim's Ironbreakers are actually very good against units like Marauders with great weapons because well, they're obviously much more expensive. These guys, because of their high melee defense, they're going to take very little damage, in spite of the fact that these guys do have armor piercing. Over here, the Hammerers have gotten caught out by a pincer from the Maws of Savagery, Wolfric, as well as the Marauders with great weapons, as well as another unit of Marauders with great weapons, and they are simply getting swamped and slaughtered. Hammers do not have particularly good melee defense, and so the Marauders will actually hit fairly consistently, much as the Maws of Savagery with their insane melee stats. The Slayers are now shifting around, trying to interfere. I do throw a few axes into them, and I do believe there is actually some friendly fire going down on them. But now it's kind of, the fight is completely breaking down. I do drop a Transmutation of Lead over here, but unfortunately my Shaman Sorcerer, I was not really paying the best attention to him, and he is actually going to get beaten down by Ungrim and forced to flee. And he's going to get shot down by the cannon before he can recover, which is definitely going to hurt me, because obviously I do lose all my spell power. Over here in the meantime, the Marauders are bogging down the Norgrim's Ironbreakers. Longbeards are engaged against Marauder Hunters, but they are getting actually shot down a decent amount here. You can see the Rangers are actually doing a good job of beating up on my skirmish units, who of course have very little armor and are very kind of weak to ranged fire. Over here, the Marauder Hunters have, and alongside these great weapons, have kind of bogged these guys down. They've kind of crushed this unit of Longbeards for the most part. And another unit over here is kind of getting, the remaining Longbeards are getting kind of swamped by Brutes of the Hound. Wolfric the Wanderer, who did actually cast, Hunter of Champions on Ungrim fairly shortly, or a short while ago, and is now just kind of beating him down. Despite the fact that Ungrim has very, very high armor. He has 120 armor. Wolfric does dish out a decent amount of hurt per hit, and he has fairly high melee stats, so he'll generally hit when fighting against Ungrim, despite the fact that he's on a chariot. So you can see a cannonball over there does clip Wolfric, but I do just run over Ungrim here, unceremoniously kind of dumping him on his rear. And the Norse Sky Trolls are breaking, but they will recover. And I'm trying to kind of run around and recover my units, and I'll be pushing them back into the fight. You can see here them throwing back the trolls, and the trolls are actually dishing out a bit of hurt to the dwarves for sure. Over here, Ungrim still around and kicking, trying to beat up on the Brutes of the Hound. The fact that these guys are unbreakable is definitely anchoring my line here and kind of saving me from a pretty depressing situation. I do manage to bring down Ungrim with a charge from Wolfric, and the Brutes of the Hound are definitely bringing their money's worth. The fact that they're unbreakable is just that simple fact is enough to make this a very valuable unit in the Norscan roster, just to anchor your line, because they do perform a bit like Orcs sometimes, where a lot of their units will flee, and the fact that this one unit at least will not flee does mean you kind of have an anchor point or a potential to stall your enemy for a little bit and buy some time for units to regroup. The Ironbreakers here, while they aren't taking much damage, they also aren't doing that much damage, or not that quickly, and you can see they're kind of, despite tearing through these Marauders with great weapons, they are kind of getting beaten down slowly but surely by the Trolls, by the Brutes of the Hound now, and they're just getting pincered and kind of whittled down over time. Now what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to shuffle my Marauder Hunters around the flank and get some rear shots in with the throwing axis. Over here you can see the Slayers are slowly but surely just getting torn apart. They're down to only a handful of models, and I'm now pushing my Marauder Hunters into melee against the cannon, just trying to shut down this artillery support once and for all. Some of these units, of course, are breaking, and some will most likely not recover. I'm hoping the trolls will... actually, these trolls are shattered, which is rather shocking. You can see, this is definitely one of the big problems with trolls. They have these guys still have 6 models left, and they're shattered. And I'm actually winning the battle. So there's no, and my lord's still around. There's no real reason why they should be shattered, and yet they are, simply because the Trolls just have such terrible leadership. And that's definitely one of the reasons I'm not the biggest fan of them. Regardless, we are kind of going to throw things into fast forward here because there's only a few seconds left, and at this point it's mostly just me flanking around. Wolfric ran down the Rangers, and you can see the throwing axis going on the Northern Ironbreakers, Maws of Savagery going on the Goblobber, and that is game. So good game to my opponent. He definitely made some great use out of a lot of his units, especially the Northern Ironbreakers. I think the Hammers were a bit of a questionable pick, and they definitely got kind of thrown away early on, charging into Pincer from a lot of my units. The Trolls did not perform. They definitely did some damage. They definitely helped beat up on the Northern Ironbreakers once they came back into the fight, but they kept retreating. They kept riding off, despite the fact that they were not being focused by the Rangers, at least not very heavily. One of the units actually shattered, despite still being on 6 models, and you can see there, and it's most likely this unit, I do believe. And Wolfric, most of these units performed very well. The Shaman Sorcerer was definitely a big mistake on my part. I simply left him in the fight against Rungrim, which is a huge mistake. Marauder Hunters were a bit of a questionable pick as well. I think they're because dwarves are short, they can't really throw over the heads of their troops. Like dwarf rangers with great weapons, for example, can throw over the heads of dwarves to attack their enemies. These guys can't really do that. They'll just get obstructed and struggle to find an angle. But yeah, as you can see, the Brutes of the Hound did fairly well. The Maws of Savagery did fairly well. A lot of the dwarf units, of course, have to be cut down to the last. And yeah, so yeah, Trolls not something I would really recommend. These guys were they do a fairly sizable investment for the fact that they did very little. I think I'd definitely have been better off investing in 2 units of, say, Marauders with great weapons and an extra Marauder Berserker or something like that. Maybe even Chariots. Some units like that would definitely serve me better. Even a Savage Mammoth, which I could have afforded, or Feral Mammoth, would have been better, I think. But regardless, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. As usual, I will be, hopefully, there will be no more technical breakdowns. And, yeah. As usual, if you guys have any comments, criticism, any suggestions, anything like that, anything you'd like to see, be sure to post those down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. And I'll see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.